welcome to the show. I am so happy to welcome back Melody Valenzuela, educational therapist. How are you, Mel?
Hi, nice to see you. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm really excited about this.
I know. And you and I offline have been talking quite a bit, about the topic that we're going to handle today. And I'm just so glad that you are willing to come and play and share this information with the audience because I think it's important information.
It's
Um,
important. It's so common, such a common issue. Parents need to know.
Yeah. So many times on this show, we talk about intentionality and how we quickly
Mhm.
sometimes and too quickly judge someone's intentionality of their behavior
Mhm.
inappropriately. So, something that you and I have been exploring and thinking deeply about for our clients that we support is what happens when a stress response is triggered when learning is supposed to be happening, right?
Mhm.
And by stress response, what we mean is flight,
Mhm.
freeze. And two F's have been added, which are fibbing and fawning. Fibbing as in
Mhm.
lying, fawning as pleasing the person that's placing the demand on us. And
Right.
we're noticing some patterns here for us.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering how, if you can share actually your experiences as an ed therapist about how you're seeing these stress responses come up when
Yeah.
learning is supposed to be happening.
Yeah. Well, fibbing is such a common one. I mean, I think in an educational setting, we're going to see fawning and fibbing a lot more often than we're going to see fighting, hopefully, or fleeing as well. So, but just to focus on the fibbing one, and I like that we're calling it fib because I feel like lying has such that negative connotation just immediately, and it's so much easier to judge somebody's intention even just labeling it as lying. But a fib is just it's a softer term for it because that is what's really happening. They're not when they're responding to stress, they're fibbing. They're not. This is not a predetermined scenario. They didn't come up with a lie. This is not planned and premeditated. A fib is more like, ooh, reaction. I'm in stress. Something's, hitting me a little too hard. I don't quite know what to do with this. I'm just going to fib real quick to provide some kind of protection for myself. So, which is why we can classify it as a self-preservation technique. And this is what students are doing. So we will often see this with, all students, but much more typically or more frequently with kiddos that are dealing with ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's several reasons for that. If you think about ADHD as an impaired executive functioning, then that kind of that breathes its way so smoothly into fibbing because they don't have some of the executive functions just quickly at hand that many of us have. For example, they may struggle with inhibition or impulsivity. So it's like even if they wanted to respond in a different way, I'm asking them, let's just super simple. Did you get that homework done? Yep, totally got it done. Yep. Even if they had a chance to pause and think and they didn't quite have that, if they had the luxury to inhibit a quick response, they might consider a different answer. But in but when that's a struggle for you and impulsivity is so natural and your brain doesn't have another option, then fibbing just comes out really, really easily. So, for particular thinkers, fibbing is just an easy option.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we think about lying as, oh, kids are going to lie because it's easier than doing hard work. Kids are going to lie because it's easier than upsetting their teacher. Well, maybe kids are going to fib because that's the option that their mind quickly grabbed, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Which really stinks. I mean, I think it puts students in a really precarious situation. It opens them up for punitive response.
Yeah.
When we're not really doing this in a premeditated, volitional, planned way. This
Hmm.
isn't, this is a knee jerk reaction to being stressed,
Hmm.
right? And so, how do we understand this more functionally and more respectfully? I think.
Hmm.
I think if a parent is listening to this and they're like, oh, my kiddo can respond to stress with fibbing.
Hmm.
I would encourage a parent or a family to back up and say, let's talk about how that demand is being presented.
Right.
And let's also talk about does the demand make sense
Hmm.
to this person? Are they bought into what this is? And I'm not saying that kids have to buy into everything that is presented
Hmm.
to them, but they should understand what is being asked of them and presented to
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when that demand is too high, that's what's triggering stress.
Mm-hmm.
So the demand can be too high for several reasons. I mean, if we're going to think about ADHDers and just their ability to really attend well and to think about details and to be able to plan appropriately, if the demand is too high, they're suffering. They're in a position that is triggering stress. So, um, how do they defend themselves? How do they protect themselves against that relational upset that is so, it could become the case for them if it's repetitive. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I,
Yeah. Mel, you and I in our other conversation that we had, um, we were talking about how learning is risky.
oh yeah.
That learning new things is risky business.
Hmm.
And that if we expect people to enter or do something that's risky, okay, there need to be protections and safety. And
Yep.
that's not just about learning, that's about any kind of thing that we do that might be risky.
Hmm.
And so, how do we then create safe, collaborative, respectful spaces for learning?
Hmm.
I mean, I wonder if you could weigh in on how you might do that, even in your sessions, or how you might support students or families to create those safe, collaborative learning spaces.
Right. Right. So if there's not that foundation of trust, you're not getting anywhere with a student, and you're probably as a parent not going to get very far either. As soon as that that trust feels broken, the student is less and less likely to tell you what's really going on. And we want them. Learning is, they are in a vulnerable position because they're coming in and exposing, hey, here's everything I don't know. um, so they're already vulnerable. So to support them in a way that keeps them feeling safe, is going to keep that communication open. It's also going to keep them out of stress mode to where they can actually learn. When you're in stress mode and you're going to move toward self-preservation, you don't have space for higher level thinking. Um, so yeah, I think the first way to kind of create that safety with a student is to put yourself in the position. Let's say a fib might be happening or about to happen. You're wanting to create this space where you're assuring that child that I'm going to be understanding. Whatever it is that you bring up, you're not going to get a response from me that's going to, fluster you or embarrass you or hurt you. So when you as the adult are providing an atmosphere that makes them feel understood and heard, then that's a win. You're on the right path. So one of the ways to do that is to really take some time to slow down and consider what is going on for this student. Is this a planned, premeditated issue? Because you want to handle that differently. And first of all, I will say, if your kid struggles with executive functioning, they're not planning. They're not planning to lie. They don't have some large scheme with several steps. These kids' steps, that's not what's happening. That's just not in the realm of capability typically. So you can most of the time count on this was a fib, that was a stress response. So I think even just saying that to them, hey, so I realize that you're not trying to be deceitful. I think I can trust about you because I've gotten to know you a little bit. I know that you're not trying to be deceitful. That's not who you are. And at the same time, you told me this was done, but then it turns out it's not done. So now we have a problem to solve. It seems like what you said doesn't match up with what was actually happening. Were you aware of that? Let's take a second to slow down and breathe. How would you answer my question if you had a little more time to think about it? If you know that I'm not going to react and freak out, and you had a little more time, could you explain to me why this didn't happen instead of catching them off guard? Because I think a lot of times what we'll say is, hey, is the homework done? Show me the homework. And they're just like, oh, and they're just all of a sudden caught because they know it's not done. And there's a whole scope of reasons. They don't want to disappoint you. They don't want to get in trouble. So if you set the tone with a how question, a question that is really more Socratic in terms of trying to really get to the bottom of something. That way you're providing space where they're less likely to be caught in a lie because they're less likely to feel stressed and to then lie.
Mm-hmm.
So a how question. Hey, that thing we worked on yesterday and you took it home? How did that go for you? About how long did that take? Did that feel hard? And then you're opening up space for them to say more than yes, no, it got done. You're opening up space for them to say, you know what, I pulled that out and gosh darn it, if it wasn't super overwhelming, and then they're actually able to share, which is what we want. Don't we want to hear what their experience is?
Yeah.
Don't we want to know how they're feeling so that we can make it better for them?
Yeah.
So when you help them enter it into a space of and asking those kinds of broader questions is going to create the vibe for them that this person might actually really care about how I feel. They might actually really want to understand what happened. So when I turn this in and I did 1 out of the 5 problems, this person, Melody, she might actually want to know why number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 didn't get done, and why is that? To truly seek to understand where they were coming from instead of putting them in a position to quickly have to fib.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many pieces here. I'm really struck by the interaction and how you can't separate emotions from learning. Especially if we hold learning as risky, right?
Yeah.
Emotions inevitably are at play. Establishing those bases of safety, trust, respect, and those spaces for learning to occur is so important. It reminds me of like Maslow's hierarchy, where we want to establish, like we want to meet the base needs before the actualization or the learning at the very top can happen. And I think ultimately, everyone is well-intentioned usually. Like parents are well-intentioned. We're well-intentioned to help this student do the best that they can and find success in whatever way that, they're going to find success. And that I think, setting up the environment is so critical, because you're talking about setting up the environment not only in the moment, but I'm thinking about even setting up the environment itself. Like maybe checking in on homework, maybe the best time to do that is not when you're in the car rushing to another activity.
Yeah.
Right? Like I will say, as a parent who's had plenty of low parenting moments, um, my timing can really stink about
Mhm.
when I'm asking those questions. And then I'm caught off guard, and I now am stressed, and I have a stress
Yeah.
response. So even encouraging parents who find themselves in this position where um, fighting could also be like arguing, right?
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
talking back. Fleeing can be like avoidance.
Mhm.
Like, I'm just gonna run away, or I'm not gonna answer, or I'm gonna avoid that I'm just gonna pretend that never happened, right?
Right.
Um, as parents, knowing our stress responses can be really, really helpful in how we meet our children in the
Uh-huh.
context of demands.
Yes.
So, what
And
you're,
and as
yeah,
a
go ahead.
teacher too. Well,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
as a teacher, as a coach, as
yeah,
soon as soon as you are stressed, you're going to get a response from them.
yeah,
As soon as you're showing that you're stressed, you're, you're gonna they're going to respond as well. They're going to fight you. They're going to flee away from you. They're going to fawn and just do whatever they can to please you and keep you happy so that you don't freak out and they're in danger.
yeah,
Um, yeah, or so being aware of your own typical response as the adult, because you are in control. You are the grown up. We talked about this last time as well, that like this is an adult world. You are controlling what they do, when they do it, what's in the kitchen. If you didn't cook that night, you're still controlling what's in the pantry. So they are already coming from that sense of not being in control. And you may see your kiddo starting to fib more when they're in that developmental stage around 8 or 10, and between 8 and 10, when they really start to become aware that the world is gigantic around me.
hmm,
Maybe I'm not the center of the universe. Oh my gosh. And that feeling of this is huge. I'm just a tiny piece of a very humongous world around me. They lose that sense of control. So, yeah, that's where you really might see fibbing come out a little more often as well. But definitely doing what you can as a parent to to control your own stress response is going to keep the whole situation much more calm.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I find that to be, just personally, I find that to be really challenging. Where keeping a pulse on my own state,
Mhm.
and how I'm managing a situation. I mean, the other thing that I think is fascinating is that, parents oftentimes are motivated by their anxieties
Mhm.
um, about and for their children. And
Mhm.
anxiety
Mhm.
is one of the ways in which we know what you really care about. I mean, we're not anxious about
Yeah.
things we don't care about.
Right.
And so that's important information. It's not get rid of it, never talk about it. It's
Right.
really understand it for yourself. And then how can you create a space with your kiddo, even if that kiddo is 18,
Right.
22, right?
Right.
Um, how do you create a space where both of you are coming at a situation to solve a problem? And that's what I really love how, earlier what you said, like, help me understand this so that we can solve this problem together. Like I can help you solve this
Together.
problem, but let's do that together. And maybe
Yes.
the other thought, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I really feel like if we can, we would.
Oh my gosh. That's exactly. If kids can, okay. If kids can read, they'd be reading. They're not making it up for fun. They
Yeah.
would like to succeed like the rest of the class is succeeding. If
Yeah.
I can control my emotions and not make a scene, I would. If I could not cry in class and bring on a ton of embarrassment, I would be controlling my crying.
Yeah.
If I can, I will, because I
Yeah.
want I want to succeed. I want to achieve. I don't want to be embarrassed. If I could hold this in and contain myself, that's what I would be doing. And for fibbing, if I could do something else, I would be.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you're in that stress mode, if I could think of something besides fighting or fleeing, I would be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's really important because it puts our mindset more in support and teaching versus punishment and judgment.
Yes.
And, punishment and judgment doesn't have, it's not a good environment for learning to occur.
Let's say that's the least constructive environment for learning.
Yeah.
Punishment and judgment.
I mean, I think, the other thing that you and I are in agreement with, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mel, but we're not saying not to have rules and boundaries.
Oh, please have all the rules and all that. I'm very old school with boundaries. And this is why it's important to distinguish between that intentional, premeditated lying versus fibbing, because we need to, as parents and coaches, handle that completely differently. Listen, we are not saying don't call your kid out on lying because, oh, it's just a stress response. There's nothing to do about it. First of all, there's tons to do about it as a stress response. But secondly, if your kiddo is making up stories to get their way, oh, mom, Friday night, yeah, I'm really going to have to go to a study group at Samantha's. It's a study group starting at 10:30, and I have to wear a strapless hot pink dress to that. I have to. That's premeditated. She's making a plan.
Yeah.
Okay. That is a moral issue, not a stress response. We need boundaries because we need to be raising children with a moral compass. If not for their own sake, for the sake of the rest of the world. Let's raise children with boundaries.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's when you need to build in serious accountability. That's when trust is really broken. Right. Because I think as parents, we might say, well, you lied to me, so now I can't trust you anymore. Okay. But did they stress response fib, or did they premeditate and were intentionally deceitful?
Yeah.
Because that's a trust breaker over there. Fibbing is not a trust breaker. Fibbing is where you as the parent need to sit back and say, whoa, what kind of environment am I creating to where my kid is so stressed out that this is their go-to? So just really distinguishing that. And then practically, because my pet peeve is when smart people talk about big deals and they never bring it down to earth and tell you what to do about it. So what? Okay, yes, I have a fibber at home. So what? So we're saying, how do you create that space? Okay, how do you? Mm-hmm. When we ask kids, so I think as adults, we often ask kids to do more than we're willing to do ourselves. We're like, okay, slow down, take a breath, show me your belly breath. I need you to calm down. And did we do that? Did we do that? Is mama driving the car and trying to get through Starbucks drive-through and freaking out because someone just backed into her? Is mommy taking belly breaths? Right? So when we ask kids to do more than we're willing to do, that's a trust breaker. Okay, so we can do this through modeling. I had to do this with a student the other day. I was frustrated about something not getting through to her. And it was a perfect moment to show her how, as an adult, I take responsibility for my emotions and I don't just unleash them on whomever I'm around. Yeah. So I had this moment where it wasn't getting through to a kiddo. And I was like, I'm going to need to just, let's have a brain break. I'm going to need to take some deep breaths because I'm noticing that I'm feeling frustrated. And I don't usually feel frustrated. I need to think about why. I need to take a moment to calm down. And then I just kept explaining to her, you know what? I think I'm frustrated because I don't feel like I'm doing a very good job right now. It's my whole job to teach you this. And for some reason, I can't get it across. I need to try again. Will you give me a second chance? Let's take a brain break, take some breathers. I'm going to try again to do my best. And then the kiddo, She actually said, sure, take your time. So, so I handled my own stress response instead of unleashing it toward her, where then she would inevitably have a stress response.
Yeah.
So we can't ask children, okay, we're the grown-ups with the fully developed prefrontal cortex, not the kid. They're on their way to creating those habits.
Yeah.
So so getting ourselves in check first. So that's the practical. Everything you think you should be asking your kid to do to manage his emotions, are you doing that first?
Yeah.
And is that your habit? Because if it's your
Yeah.
habit, that's the zone you're creating at home. If you're a teacher, create that habit in the classroom.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really powerful, Mel. Because it requires for us as parents to know ourselves and practice in a way that can be demonstrated in those hot
Yeah.
pressure cooker moments, right?
Hmm.
The other thing that I really love about what you're saying is it's from a psychological perspective, because I can't help myself, is that it being able to say where you're coming from as a teacher or as a parent in the midst of this interaction
Hmm.
really helps to develop the differentiation of self and
Yep.
other.
Yes.
And it's so critical to help kids and young people understand that they are different creatures than other people.
Yep.
And what does that mean? And how is that different from person to person? But that really is important in identity development.
Hmm.
Um, and being able to articulate this, slow it down, connect the dots, narrate, because really what you're doing is narrating your experience in the midst of
Yeah.
this interaction, is educational, informative, respectful.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes we don't believe that kids, especially the kids, teens, and young adults that I work with who have disabilities, we don't presume that they're competent to do this.
Right.
And it really messes, because then we're really promoting power differentials and authority differentials
Right.
and a feeling of
Right.
not being involved in my life and disempowering or not promoting agency, if you will.
Hmm.
So this is what like lovely, and I love that you're taking some of these big theoretical concepts we're talking about, and really giving a real time IRL example of like what that might
Yeah.
look like. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I think, can we talk about it's still on my brain going back to why people with ADHD, you might see this a little more often, and really how to respond to that
mm-hmm,
as a parent, because we talked about demand. If they can do it, they would do it, right? So you know, what remembering as a parent that what works for you may not work for them. Let's say they have some large paper to write, and dad's best idea is for you to close the door to your room, and it needs to be very bright and very quiet, and you need to have organization across your desk, and you need to sit there and bang out that paper, and you need to do it quickly, and then it will all be done. Because dad's best idea is, let's just get this done so that you don't have to worry about it anymore, because that's what feels good to dad, to finish something and check it off the list. Okay, for kids with ADHD, that feels like torture. That is absolutely a torture chamber that you just created for them. They need breaks, they need stimulation around them to be able to have a brain break where a car goes by and they go, ooh, oh, that's cute. I want that when I'm 35. And then be able to get back to work. Um, Sometimes kids need music to listen to. Sometimes kids need it a little bit darker to calm down. If you have a sensory sensitive kid and you stick him in a bright room, no, no. Now he has to process all the light and how that's affecting him instead of being able to think through what he's supposed to be doing. So, um, so that's one way where we can really consider the demand we're placing on kids is truly thinking through, this is what would work for me, this is my setup, but take time to learn, experiment, Record it if you have to, write it down if you have to in a notebook. This is when it worked and this is when it didn't work. That's what I'm doing with my students all day long. Okay, with this kid, this is what works. And I write it down for them. We talk about it. Last time you tried to sit down and work on that, it wasn't very successful. Let's try something else so you can feel more successful. Let's do it differently. So, and that whole idea of restructuring to scaffold the demand, maybe instead of sitting that kid down to write the entire paper, you sit down with them together and say, let's think of this in small pieces. Maybe scaffolding is enough in the form of just giving them an outline. Maybe scaffolding has to go all the way back to the beginning. Hey, this is a research paper. Have you done any research? So maybe you can tell the kid, go do research, and that's enough scaffolding. Maybe you have to sit down and say, what is research? How many articles have you read? Let's find one. Did you read the title? Is the title appropriate? I don't know if the title is appropriate. Did you read the first paragraph? Let's find. Scaffolding might have to go all the way down to tiny, tiny bite size, but you're saving the kid from a stress response when you see what they are capable of, and structuring all the way down to the base level as needed, if that's needed.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Then they don't, when it's doable, you don't have stress. Find a way to make it doable. You're going to have to get creative. Every brain is really, really different.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of like this, this idea of respecting neurology.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has their conditions for thriving.
Right.
And identifying those conditions is a respect to our personal neurology and the way in which we are the most comfortable in the world. Because, and I hear, in my mind, I can hear maybe some dissent to this, which is like, well, we all have to deal with stress. Well, how in the world are they going to learn how to manage demands if the environment is always being tweaked to meet them?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay, we're breaking down and tweaking the environment to meet them so that they can learn to deal with stress.
Right. Right. Right.
You're not removing stress. We're never going to remove stress.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the piece, though. It's like, in order for us to teach and have a platform for that to occur, one person said it's like putting primer on before paint. Like establishing is like the primer so that the paint can actually go on. It's really establishing this learning environment so that we can actually learn the skills to use them under duress, under stress, under demands, because we're all very clear that stress and demands are a part of life.
Yeah.
We all understand that piece.
Right. So if you're trying to help a child grow into an adult that does not just use fight and flight and freeze and fawn, but someone who can meet the pressures that they're under, they need to know about themselves what worked and what didn't work when they were under stress.
Mm-hmm.
So remember, it's not protecting them from stress, and because we don't want to do that. We want to gradually help them understand how to respond to stress well. If you're constantly protecting them from stress, then they're 25 having a meltdown. But if you're teaching them in increments that actually make sense to them how to deal with stress, then you can start layering the demand over their lifetime, which is going to happen naturally, so that they really can meet that demand and not have an overstressed response to it.
Yeah. And really, that is what we need to be preparing our young people for, actually. Because the world, adulting is hard. There's a lot to contend with. And so building these skills, I don't think it's ever too early to build these skills, to be honest. I think, and I mean, if we just put ourselves in the position of feeling heard, understood, and attended to, in a respectful, collaborative, compassionate way. I really don't see the downside of that. When we
Well,
talk about, yeah, go
that's what
ahead.
we try to do in adult relationships,
Yeah,
right? Isn't your marriage more successful when you can sit down and have a conversation that's like, oh, now I see why you did that.
yeah,
I mean, when I feel heard and understood because he listened to the whole story before trying to problem solve, then um, things are just so much more smooth. So if we're making that the goal in adult relationships, why wouldn't we be teaching children to do that at 2, 3?
yeah.
Oh, your shoes are sticky. Oh, your shoes are sticky. That stinks. Yeah, let's problem solve that together. I think the togetherness is a real
Yes.
key.
Yeah.
Instead of
Agreed.
you solving it or the child just because we're wanting to develop problem solving skills. If we're trying to develop critical thinking, mommy coming in and solving the problem every time, it's not going to help them strengthen that muscle. But so first of all, together means they're practicing skills that we want them to have, and together also feels like they have a say in what's happening. And you're
Absolutely.
building that mindset that I am competent and I will be able to figure this out.
Yeah.
And that someone's on my side. It's safer.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it is the rallying war cry in the disability world, which is nothing about us without us, or with
Right.
us, not for us. We need to be at the
Yes.
table. We need to have
Yep.
a voice, and this is how we learn. We need spaces to learn.
Hmm.
So involve
Hmm.
us, please, right? And I
Right.
think that this is really critical.
Hmm.
Awesome,
Yeah.
Mel. Thank you so much
I love this.
for
I'm
coming
so
on.
excited for people to hear,
Yeah,
right? And just
yeah,
hopefully provide parents with something real practical,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
is
Absolutely.
the goal.
Um,
Yeah.
hey Melody, if
Thank
people
you.
are listening to this and they want to reach out to you, find out more about you, what's
Mhm.
the best way to do that?
Best way um, is hit up the website and see what we're about. The website is rapporteducation.org. Rapporteducation.org. Yeah. And you
Yeah.
can message us there. We have other ed therapists available and tutors that are also, if your concern is mostly academic, but trauma invested tutors that might understand where kiddos are coming from. So they can't help but get an ET lens on things when they're working with us. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Thank you,
find us.
Melody. I'll put that information in the description below too for anyone that's listening. All
Oh,
right, you.
great.
Thank you. Let's do it
Thank you so
again.
much for having me. Yeah,
Okay.
talk later. Bye bye.
Bye.